Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Zimbabweans in the diaspora and in Zimbabwe. Welcome to our Sunday topic, Chinese in Zim Economy and Politics. Is it a case or blessing? I would like to welcome my co-host, Finos. I would like to welcome Dr. Dube. I would like to welcome my sister, Miss AJ. This is a hot topic. Co-host, your opening statements. How are you, my brother?
My brother, good morning. How are you? Can you hear me first of all?
You are loud and clear, loud and clear.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. AJ is African Jewel. I think you remember the name. That's every woman. I suppose you know that.
Yes, I remember my sister. I won't forget. I've interacted with her so many times.
No, it's good that you because the few people that I forwarded this space to found that the topic was one of the best that we could have come up with in terms of the proliferation of the Chinese into Zimbabwe and across the continent of Africa. So I think it's important that we discuss such issues and see the way forward, whether it's counterintuitive for us to have such influx of Chinese within the African continent.
So, co-host, would you like to give your opening statements regarding this topic? What is your perception?
I'm very conflicted when it comes to Chinese investment, because it always comes with attachments. What I'll do is I'll take you on a journey. It's going to be because since we are still waiting for people, I'll take you on a little journey what the Chinese are doing in Africa as a whole. The Chinese are very crafty. They know exactly what they are doing in terms of investment. They are sinking Africa into massive debt. I'll give you typical examples. You've got, I think they've managed to revamp infrastructure in countries like Kenya and Tanzania. If you look at the rail network in Tanzania, what they're doing is they're trying to link, that is Tanzania, Rwanda and Uganda via rail network, which is very plausible. Looking at the long-term benefits to these countries, because apparently it reduces the tonnage cost with about $2,000 per ton, but that's over a 20-30 year period. But the amount of debt accrued is astounding, and it's for future generations. We're not going to be even able to pay such debt in our lifetime. And I will give you one issue. I think that's the Kenyan deal. On the Kenyan deal of what they call the SGR rail network system, it links Mombasa to Nairobi, and it's a fast train, goods train facility. Very brilliant. Everybody agrees it is one of the best facilities in Africa, including the one they're doing in Tanzania. But on the deal itself, on the contract, I'll read what it says, right? Where we are kept in the dark by our governments, right? I'll read the statement it says on the contract. And remember, this is financed by Chinese investment banks, right? So it says the borrower shall keep all terms and conditions in connection with this agreement strictly confidential. Okay? The second part says, without prior written consent to the lender, the borrower shall not disclose any information of this agreement to a third party unless required by applicable law. Right. So, which means when these deals are signed by these governments, essentially they cannot disclose anything until or unless if required by law. Otherwise, we are kept in the dark. We will not know what is happening. Only recently, Kenya has gone after the new president, Ruto, came in. I think his people went through the deal and discovered that this was one of the clauses that we cannot disclose the deal. And it's a shame that our governments subscribe to such, where everything is kept a secret and we are signing our children's future away. Right. As we welcome other people, welcome to the space. I will continue with the Zimbabwean side of things, all right? So you see how the Chinese are doing it in Africa. On the Zimbabwean side, the investment, I'm not privy to what's happening in terms of the deals. But what I can tell you now is Between 2016 and I think 2018, the trade was over $1 billion between China and Zimbabwe. And remember, China being the biggest tobacco importer. The problem we've got now is what the Zimbabwean government has done. I think it's just the disparity in trade. Zimbabwe has managed to submit mineral rights to these Chinese companies who have no regard whatsoever for the environment. And just to put you into perspective here, the Chinese actually financed the National Defense College to a tune of $100 million. And this is all meant to come out of the business. How are we going to repay all these debts? And the recent parliament is said to have been financed by the Chinese. It wasn't donated. It was financed by the Chinese. That's not for free. So as far as I'm concerned, we are getting, a raw deal from the Chinese People's Republic. And I don't think, our governments keep us in the loop as to what is happening in terms of the intricacies of the deals that they sign. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, my sister Pelagia. Everyone, welcome to the space. We thought it is important, it is pertinent that we discuss, the Chinese impact on Zimbabwe and Africa as a whole. So you are free to grab a mic. You highlighted a few issues here in terms of health and safety that and in the environment, that the techno do care for such when they do their mining, which is really a travesty. And you also spoke about the aspect that they don't bank their money in Zimbabwe, which is very true, because what these people do is they will be having holding companies. Remember, their parent companies are in China, so they have to pay dividends to those companies. So which means most of the money they make goes to the dividends. It goes as dividends abroad. So how much are we being short-charged as a government, as a nation? It leaves a lot to be desired with. And it's a shame that, our governments have to put up with such. Sisi Comfort, welcome to the space.
Thank you. Happy Sunday. Very good submission and good topic too. I hope everybody's doing well. I live in the US. I've lived in the US for the last 20 years. Everything we use in the United States of America comes from China. Walmart, all the mega stores are provided for by China, because China, they have massive industries, they have massive manufacturing, but they have grades of things in which they provide these things, these products. To the US, to the Americas, my grades are where they're the top quality. But we never not a sub-grade and the lowest grade that they ship to Africa. That's why you find the quality of things when they end up in Africa. Cannot start business in China. As you got it, China, it's cheap. But the same quality, I'll get it in Home Goods, I'll get it in a Target in America, and it's high quality. So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I want to invite us to open up our minds and get away from, we complain, but I want us to be a bit on the sober mind and start thinking about how the world economy is working and functioning. This morning, I just responded to Mama and I said, we have to stop the propaganda here. We'll never be a colony again. Because if you look outside your windows, the global north understands that Africa is the future. At some point, Africa has to do business with that part of the world. We need some diplomatic relations. The idea we have to operate in silos. It never works because the world is getting to a global village. So I'm wondering how do we as Africans leverage our relations with spaces like China? Let's not look at it from a point of we have no governance. Essentially, we have no rule of law, and we have no leaders who care about us. Let's play this scenario. If we have a utopic space where we have leaders who actually care about us, as in the US, for example, they put policies and procedures, and they put their bargaining power at the table with China. We're only going to do business under these terms, and this is the quality that we're going to accept. If China were doing business in Zimbabwe right now, and we had leaders who cared, would we not invite China on our terms, because they're coming to, the reason why they come to our land and they misbehave is because there is no protocol. They don't have protocol to observe. So if they were to come and say, my industry, SI, all those industries that have closed down, Marare, we want you to come and get whatever you want to get. Let's say you want to get some lithium. Can you come to Mbare and reconstruct the whole thing, like rebuild that whole space, Mbare, make it into a modern market, yeah? Make it into a smart city. But you're only going to do that on our terms. We get to tell you the quality that you're going to construct. Would that not be a good transactional relationship with China? The Chinese, I know they're extractive. I know like they're like mice. Would destroy. But I'm also wondering, let's also point at why are they able to do that? They're not just coming to Zimbabwe by osmosis. They are coming in Zimbabwe because they're doing deals with bad leaders who don't care about the people. So they go into an area, they mistreat our workers because there's no protocol for them to observe. So I think that's what I wanted to say. Is it a curse? It could be a blessing if we used our bargaining power. It could be a blessing because we have something to gain from them. They want something from us. We have the bargaining power. And so I think this morning, co-host, I wanted to just open up a little bit our imagination to just think of a world where diplomacy really works, diplomatic relations really worked, and we came to the table. Before I yield my mic, I want to say, let's remember the power that we have as Africans. We're able then to bargain with the Chinese. When the Chinese come to us, we are able to tell them how we want to do business with them.
Oh, thank you so much, my sister. You touched upon a lot of issues there. I think you brought up a different perspective to this, that it's not all bad in terms of Chinese investment. What is bad is the negotiating team that we put forward, because we are getting the raw deal as a country.
I would like to welcome my other co-host, Ian. How are you, Ian?
Hey, I'm well, Advocate. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our participants and my colleague, Finos. How are you doing? And all the speakers. Perhaps, if I can just add perspective to one leg that is very important in any economy, and that's the Standards Association. So you find that the capacity or the lack thereof in our Zimbabwe Standards Association is the key driver around how we actually implement not only international but local standards, and whether we're actually able to test the quality of product against that standard in a scientific and an objective way. And that's the reason why you'll find that imported product into different countries, into different jurisdictions, manufactured by the same country, China, and even sometimes manufactured by the same company in China, is different. It's because the specific countries have invested in, one, their standards, both internationally and locally, and then secondly, in the lab equipment that is able to validate the prototypes as part of the local certifications and so forth. And you find, for example, that South Africa has a very mature, standards association and labs that are able to actually test against that standard. And so an item is certified to have met a specific specification before it comes in. And yes, China has the economies of scale to be able to assist the acceleration of African countries as far as access to product, access to technology, and velocity when it comes to the production of things, so that we can also specialize in the areas that we are stronger at, whether it's mining, agriculture, science and technology, whatever else, and leverage the strong aspects that China has to bring to the table. The one other area that we need to really unpack is the issue of every country has its business approach. Every country has its philosophy. Every country has its values that it imbibes and takes into its international trade and into its international dealings. And the Western Bloc is different from the Eastern Bloc, is different from the Arabic Bloc. Every one of these are different. So we must at some point unpack the aspects of the philosophy behind the Chinese Communist Party and how they, as they engage from a business perspective, also, drive those policies and frameworks that are favorable to their approach of whether you call it quote and unquote world dominance or influence and impact of other nations. I think host and co-host and speakers, that would be my first submission as we unpack this discussion.
Oh, thank you so much, co-host Ian. There are loads of issues that you actually spoke about. What I'll do is I will come back to most of these issues. Can we please go to Dr. Admire? He dropped earlier on. So if you can go ahead, please.
After independence, Zimbabwe did not exactly pander to the expectations of the Chinese, regardless of all this help that I've alluded to earlier. The Zimbabwean government tried to look west. I don't know if that's a term or a phrase. And we have a situation where some people even say our prime minister and later president at the time, Robert Mugabe, even was more English than the English. He had more tea than the English. It goes to show the culture that we adopted. It was more Western. Now, where did it all go wrong? We look at it from a situation where the Lancaster House Agreement, in it, there are points where the British agreed to fund the land reform, but of course on a willing buyer, willing seller kind of agreement. And those who were sitting on the land, well, that's a historical thing. I don't even want to delve much on that because I'll divert slightly from the topic. But at the end of it all is that that system failed for one reason or the other, which I don't want to delve with. It's not part of this topic today. But ultimately, it led to the sanctions because of the way that Zimbabwe dealt with that matter. And of course, other matters, be it human rights to put in courts or whatever else. All I'm trying to bring to the fore here in this argument is Zimbabwe found itself in a situation of strife, situation of need, as it did during the historical time. And as they say, a drowning man will clutch at a serpent because they want to keep their nose above the waterline. They're going to grab at that snake because it's just trying to survive. This is how I'm looking at it. I could be wrong. That's why we're having this discussion. Zimbabwe had to grab at the serpent that was thrown at them by the Chinese. In fact, I think I prepared when I got the message about this discussion. I think I prepared. I just looked. I had a cursory look at the numbers, and I can give you the numbers now. Right. Zimbabwe's GDP around 2000, which was the time that we got sanctions, was about 6.6 billion. And soon after the sanctions, this number got so low to a point of about 4 billion. Imagine the world was progressing. If we look at it against what other world countries or even African countries that are neighbors to us were doing at the time, they were increasing by about 8%, 7% around this time, Zambia, Mozambique respectively. Yet we're going backwards to a point of as low as 4.4 billion. GDP, 4.4 billion in 2008. Now, of course, we can directly ascribe this to the sanctions. What did the Zimbabwe government do? The same players, I said, some of whom have were participating and were called over to China, were trained in China, then of course had to look to Chinese. It's not like since 1980 we were dealing with the Chinese. When they went there, it was more from a situation not of strength, but of weakness, because it was with a begging bowl. And controversial as I might sound, without the Chinese, Zimbabwe would have sank around that period. I don't know if I should say Zimbabwe or whatever the case could have been. One or the other, ZANU-PF would have gone. Yes, some people would like that. Some people would not. I don't know. But the point is, it was so catastrophic at the time. We could have not even afforded fuel, no electricity, no water. If you recall, in 2008, we had the worst case of typhoid and cholera. Someone can look up right now the numbers that people died just from general water. We could not even have water at the time. Now, when Zim went to the Chinese, it was with a begging bowl, as I said earlier, to request, to ask, please keep our nose above the waterline. Now, the Chinese came to our aid, again as they did during the colonial period. What did they bring to the fore? I also prepared a small table of what they brought. From 2004, just bear with me as I look at it. Yeah. These are the projects that the Chinese have come with. And you can see how central they are. I actually had to look even at the percentages of their contribution to the economy in terms of GDP. 2004, the Kariba South expansion project this value of inflation adjusted it to 2020 figures, 320 million, 33% of the economy's activity. 2005, Wange Thermal Power Station. 2006, the network expansion. 2007, Harai International Airport began. I didn't realize it started that early. 2008, National Sports Stadium. 2009, National Defense College. Someone mentioned it earlier that they paid. In fact, in that figure, they spent about 98 million. And because we were so low in our GDP, it contributed about 10% of our economic activity in that country. That's just that one project. 2010, Zisco. This was one of the largest, 750 million. How they used it later and why Zisco is still flat, that's another matter altogether. But we're just talking of the money that was poured in. 2011, agriculture equipment. 2012, cargo resources. The list goes on. The point is, we came to a point where, when I was looking at these figures, China was contributing close to about 80% of our economic activity. Now, that's a plus on their part. We have to give the devil their due. They came to our aid. The fact that we went there begging and they came to our aid, that's a plus on their part. They did not turn on us. 53 other countries they could have worked with in Africa, regardless what people say about what Africa provides, they could have turned elsewhere, but they still afforded us. Now, what do we do with what we begged for? Now, that's our mistake. For instance, the last speaker was speaking of the Chinese don't follow the rules, or they take their culture, be it labor culture, and bring it to Africa. I'll tell you what, we provided for them to do that. There is something called the special economic zones. We created an artificial space where international labor laws that we are a signatory to and Zimbabwe labor laws that we've created in Zimbabwe, we've got acts towards that, they don't apply within those special economic zones. And then when we created that space, we then allow the Chinese to work within that space. When our fellow Zimbabweans are working for these Chinese within those spaces and they complain, should we really be blaming the Chinese, or should we be blaming our authorities for having such an environment in our country in the first place? Imagine how, if I'm to come to Zim and I create my own space where I say domestic laws don't apply and women or men can beat each other up in this neighborhood, it doesn't apply, and the laws of Zimbabwe don't apply there. Should you blame the people who are beating each other up, or the authorities that allow that system to come into play? Therefore, there are reasons why that system is in place, which I cannot speak for because I'm not in government. But at the end of the day, the more we point fingers at the Chinese, we have to remember there are three other fingers that point back at us. We went to them, they came to our aid. We allowed space for them to act anyhow. Now, there's also another speaker who spoke of how powerful China is. This world that we live in, it's so polarized in a sense where it speaks to, if you support one, then you obviously are against the other, which is the wrong way to look at it. I was looking at some video yesterday where some Indian minister was being grilled. Why are they buying gas? No, it's fuel from the Russians, because if India buys fuel from the Russians, then it means they are supporting the Russians in a war against Ukraine. And this minister was quite eloquent and responded, listen, why is it wrong for India to buy fuel from Russia, yet it's right for Europe to buy gas from the same Russia? Isn't the same amount funding the war machinery in Russia to fight the Ukrainians? And also to look at it this way, if you've got a European problem, it doesn't necessarily follow that it's also a world problem. because a world problem usually is not a European problem. And then thirdly, he also put the fact that it's not always where if I have an agreement of national interest with Russia, it means I agree with what they're doing. This is of national interest to India, per se. So I can deal with Russia in terms of fuel and not deal with them in terms of war. It's okay for me to then the next day to deal with Europe on something else because we are national units. And I was looking at it and thinking this is quite thorough and it's quite pertinent to our Zimbabwean situation. We can deal with Chinese the same way, where if we need their expertise, yes, we can go ahead and get it. If we don't need their labor laws, we can equally say the same. Like, for instance, right now, we launched a space satellite. One of the reasons that I've been told for that satellite to go up there is because of its technology to map the mineral wealth that we have in Zimbabwe. It's painful that we've lost a lot so far, but I've got good tidings to bring to the people who are listening right now. Do you know, so far, the exploration that has been made, it's showing that Zimbabwe, all minerals combined, we have lost less than 5% of our mineral value. It's painful. It's not been used to its best. It could have done much, much more. But consider that we've still got 95% of our mineral wealth. And we can change things from now going forward. We can change our perspective. We can change the way we look at things. And when I was looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, of all that wealth that we cry so much that we've lost, if it's worth 5%, you try to extrapolate and tell yourself how much are we valued as a nation. Why I'm speaking of this, I'm speaking of the lithium revolution, the revolution that's coming of green energy. Green energy, yes, it's green. We accept it. We want it. It's going to transfer, though, the power and the money from the oil industry in the Middle East and bring it to Africa, because that green energy, be it wind power, solar, sail, whatever green energy is coming from, hydrogen, it has to be stored at some point. And storage right now, the key technology is to do with lithium. And Zimbabwe is in the top 5 of the countries with lithium, which means we are in line to be the next Dubai of the world, to be the next Saudi Arabia of the world in terms of their oil. This is where the revolution is going. What are we as a nation doing? For instance, from the education part, what is China University of Technology teaching our students? They are doing history, national accounts, finance. But this is the China University of Technology. Someone said a literal mountain was sold. Okay, it's a mountain, it's sold. In that agreement, shouldn't there be some clauses there where we say we need transfer of technology about beneficiation of lithium? We need you to set up an administration at China University of Technology that's going to deal with lithium. And we know in the next 5 years, we've got lithium engineers who are going to take us for. We are already preparing for a revolution that we are looking and see. So the thrust of my argument is the Chinese are neither devils. They are neither a curse, neither a blessing. The Chinese are available to be exploited as much as they are looking at us as an opportunity to exploit us. The relationship can be mutually beneficial to both of us. They know what they need from us. We also know what we need from them. Why don't we barter what we have for what we do not have, as much as they are also bartering what they have for what they do not have? And we then benefit equally from it. So if these companies take advantage of our laxity, really, should we be looking at them or should we be looking at ourselves? So in my closing remark, I would say the Chinese have come to our help, to our aid. They've helped us, but we have not been astute enough to deal with them in a manner that benefits us, our children, and our future.
Incredible. Incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Admire. Very, very detailed submission. I like your saying, which says a drowning man will clutch onto a serpent. So, so that's the reason why we are where we are at. But like I said, we unpack a lot of things that you have submitted as we go along. Co-host, I've got a few things here that have been highlighted. The aspect that the Chinese companies or investors do not have a share ownership kind of system, and all their holding companies are abroad, where they repatriate their profits, and there are loads of financial leakages within our system. How do we stop this at a governmental level holistically? Is there a way, or this is just going to be perpetual? Over to you, co-host.
100%. And I think this is a very, very valid point. And one of the things that you will see across every, call it Chinese diasporan country where they have interests, I'm pretty sure if we kind of looked at the statistics in terms of repatriation of wealth back to China, it would be very high. And I think this is also part of the ethos that the Communist Party drives in terms of how they put forward certain quasi-private interests. Why I say quasi is because the Communist Party actually has a hand in their oligopolistic entities that are large in China, that are also encouraged to have tentacles abroad, because they also drive not only the commercial interest, but they drive the political interest with that entrance. So yes, you will have a massive amount of leakage and repatriation of funds. Now, there was I think it was Dr. Admire Dube, if I'm not mistaken, who mentioned the Shona proverb that a drowning man will hold on or clutch on to even a serpent. And the reality at the end of the day is that because of the level of our desperation, and that desperation, in my view, is over-exaggerated. Why is it over-exaggerated? Because we have the mineral wealth, we have the resources, we have the blessings that God has given us to prosper out of our quagmire. What we don't have is effective futuristic leadership that is able to forego present and current consumption in order to put in place foundational things that can then transition the country out of the quagmire that we're in. So yes, the reality at the end of the day is that we know that gold is going out. We know that US dollars are going out. We know that minerals are going out. The issue is not that it's happening, but the fact that we don't have the appetite in the current structure of the leadership that we have to actually deal with it. So kanata kuvakirwa parliament, and I want to say this as a side note, because just in the past couple of weeks, I've recently looked at some technology that is out of China that comes with the inverters. A small little technology dongle that you plug in, and then you basically authorize it to get onto your network so that it can give you your online statistics of what power you're generating and so forth. But in understanding this piece of technology as a technology person, I realized that there is subliminal code that is attached to these electronic devices that actually captures, firstly, you are the one who give it authorization on your network, so automatically they have access to your network. And then secondly, it's sending this statistical information to a consolidated database that is actually hosted in China. And then your little mobile application is collecting the little statistics to show how much solar power you're generating, how much is left on your batteries, and you are being hoodwinked by this little front end. But in actual fact, you've sent your security details for your network out to some server sitting in a jurisdiction that actually doesn't have the laws that protect you as far as your information is concerned. And when I realized that, I partitioned my network. And so this little set of devices is separate from the rest of my infrastructure. But these are some of the things that I say to us. It is us who lack the capacity. It is us that lack the intelligence. It is us that lack the foresight. When I say us, I'm being inclusive in the sense that, yes, it's ZANU-PF to be very specific and the leadership thereof, but consequentially, it is all of us because we've aided and abetted the beast that now is. And yes, you know, some of these points are arguable, but I'm saying as Zimbabweans, we are included in the us. And this discussion is part of us then looking at it and saying, what is it then that we should be doing? So I've worked with the Standards Association some years back, and the company that I had set up in Zim, we actually sponsored because we wanted to develop the information technological prowess within the institution. And the truth of the matter is that all our institutions just need to be redone, and redone from a human capacity perspective, because we have people that are there that are utterly and completely clueless about the job that they are supposed to be doing, and are underqualified, underskilled, undertrained, but simply because they are, how do you call it, well placed, for lack of a better term. They find themselves in these places of authority, and then we are left with the reality of the sub quality, the sub performance, the sub leadership, the substandard of everything. And the truth of the matter is, it boils down to people, and the people we're talking about is Zimbabweans, and we are Zimbabweans. So therefore, we take not only direct but indirect responsibility for some of these things. My co-host, I apologize for being a little bit passionate about this, but it does hit home a bit. I yield my mic.
Oh, brilliant. You know what? You are worth all the knowledge, and I'm happy that you can share with us. I would like to acknowledge one of our legislators, or former legislators. He's always on our spaces. Mkoma Fortune Chassis is with us. So, Mkoma Chassis, welcome to the space. And I'm praying that you will be able to come and say hello. You will be able to grab the mic and give us your worth. I know you can't say much because you're part of the government, inadvertently. But you can just come and say hello. That's fine. That's not a problem. Share your knowledge as well. Dr. Admire, I just want you to think through this. In terms of technology transfer, are these foreign nations? Because the reason why I'll raise this is simple. You've got the British, you've got the Americans, you've got the Chinese. They've got the biggest embassies around Zimbabwe in Harare. What's it in for them to have such big embassies? That's the first part. The second part, technology transfer. Are they reluctant so that we remain dependent? So just keep that yourself. Mkoma Chasi, I will have to put you on the spot, unfortunately. I'm challenging you to take the mic. There are a few things that we need to just discuss. I know, like I said, you might not give us the, you can just be diplomatic as you can, but it would be ideal, if possible, if you are free to take the mic. Dr. Admire, I hope you are ready for the questions that I posed earlier on. As well, I want you to deal with the aspects you spoke about, the Chinese, helping in terms of our GDP. That was around the Kariba expansion, Wange, Zisco. Were these deliverables? How far are we with that, and what's happening? And also the technology transfer aspect that I spoke about. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. My apologies. I was playing truant here. I'm not too sure I got the exact questions you asked earlier. You said I should speak about the largest embassies, and then what was the other question? This one that you bring now.
Okay, the other one was to do with, I said we've got three largest embassies in Zimbabwe: the Chinese, the British, and the Americans.
Yeah.
Why so, and what's the interest? Why particularly Zimbabwe? And the second part was on technology transfer, that these big nations, are they reluctant to help us with technology transfer just to keep us dependent on them? Thanks.
Okay. I'll start with the first one. And of course, it's not something that I'm speaking from a point of a research response. It's an auto response according to what I've read before in my analysis. It's not really something I would say it's a research paper. But I think the reason why we have, should I say, such interest from nations of nations of importance. We're talking the Americas having this largest embassy, or China, which are the top two nations in the world in terms of economic power. Also, be it assisting us with the parliament building. We have to note that we as a country are significant. We are important. Earlier in my presentation, I spoke of being in the top 5 in terms of lithium and the energy sector diverging or divesting from dinosaur oil and coming to renewable energy. So we are at a position where we could benefit and they could also benefit. Who would not want to have a front seat to a situation where you're dealing with a nation that will provide the top 5 of those resources? And speaking of which, by the way, I have to note also the discovery of gas. Someone was even saying the gas that we have in Zimbabwe is even double in terms of reserve compared to the gas that's being mined in Mozambique. And the Mozambican gas, you had to have, of the top 10 nations in the world, 6 of them invested in that Mozambique gas. We're talking Japan, we're talking the US. Can't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but they are of the top 10 nations, 6 invested in that gas. It means they also want to have a front seat. Yet we are there as a nation with in the top 5 in terms of these minerals. And this goes on further and further. For instance, you can say we have in the world, in terms of volume, with the largest man-made water reservoir being the Kariba. In Africa, we have the top 5, national game parks. In those game parks, we are said to be holding between 80 to 100,000 elephants. We have the success in terms of the reversing of the top 5 critically endangered animals. You're talking there the leopards, the rhinos, white and black. The point is, over a whole spectrum, be it minerals, be it natural resources, be it animals, be it water resources, even the temperate weather that we have, it's ideal for growing crops. We don't have too hot a temperature, too cold. There's so many things that are going on for Zim, which can be exploited. And we have these nations that can look and see, okay, we can exploit this, we can exploit that. And some of the upheavals that we see are actually, should I say, man-made, where you have a nation that is not getting preferential treatment to be in the front seat to benefit from all these and more, who then foster or maybe I even should use the word fester, which is make it putrid. They really muddy the water so that they create this confusion to a point where they can, out of the confusion, they can benefit, be it from nefarious characters, be it from a favorable government coming in, whatever the point is. At the end of the day, we have something to give. And with this something to give, to offer the world that is coming in future, everyone wants to have a front seat. So I'm not really surprised to have these nations putting up such facilities. They are playing the long game, so to speak. They are playing the long game. They know if we set up here now and we have these situations when things calm or the chips fall in their favor, they are in the front seat to benefit. Now, to the question of
technology transfer.
Technology transfer, I want to deal also with our economy slightly. The government of Zimbabwe, as I said earlier, that we were faced with a situation where we were not getting any preferential treatment, be it from the Bretton Woods institutions in terms of debt. And while on debt as well, I have to explain this. We are in debt of, depending on who you ask, between 20 to 25 billion, all our combined debt. And our GDP is about, depending on also on who you ask, 20 to 30 billion, depending on who you ask, but general consensus is around 26 billion, which means using those figures, we are in debt of between 70, 80 to 90%. That's a wide range, I know, but 90% of our GDP. So our debt is less than our GDP. Though large, it's not exactly something catastrophic. You look at the American debt, it's 110% of the GDP. UK debt above 100%. It's not really a point that it's wrong that you have debt. Debt in itself is not a case. You just need to have debt. That's why Zimbabwe actually, when they faced closure in accessing this debt from the west, they had to look east, because debt in itself is okay. The point you have to look at is, in this case, perhaps to make the debt lighter, we should increase our output. For instance, if our debt right now is 80% of our GDP, we can easily amortize that debt by increasing our output, let's say to increase our GDP to, as they are trying to, as it's pointed out in the SDG, is it? Yes. So the point is, they could increase as Zimbabweans, we could increase our output to about 40 billion, 50 billion and become a micro-income economy. Our debt being maintained at 20. All of a sudden, that debt doesn't look so large. To give an analogy of an individual, if you're living in a house, let's say you're paying rent of $50, but your income is $100, that's 50% of your income. It means you can't afford it at that point. But if you change your job or you increase your output and you're now earning double, you're earning 200, the rent still remains at 50%, but it's changed to about 20% of your expenditure. So this is the way that we should look at it. And I am not certain as someone who's not in government, but I want to believe that's the thrust where the government was going into. That's why last year you had such output towards infrastructure. I think I wrote a paper named The Mathematics of Mosia Tunya Gold Coins, explaining why the gold coins had come into being. The point is, perhaps the government overdid this thrust towards output to a point where the economy to overheat there to pump so much money. Off the top of my head, I think about 40% of all the budgeted money went into infrastructure activity, be it the Wange expansion or the what do you call this? The Port of State Bridge Airport, and to a point where there was so much Zim dollars in the economy being given to suppliers, to a point where obviously it caused any inflation, so much inflationary pressure. The thrust there is, I understand it, maybe it should have been done in a staggered manner than to pump it all in a space of a year. So this is the situation that we're in. As for the technology transfer, listen, no one is out there, I mean, in terms of nations, who's waking up in the morning and having a headache about Zimbabwe and thinking, okay, how best, if they have a challenge with Zimbabwe, it's something they need that they can't get. Or if Zimbabwe was so insignificant, no one would be speaking of us. Nations that are insignificant, no one speaks of them. No one will wake up and just go, I'm being benevolent, I've come here to offer you technology transfer. The point is, we have to be proactive and be requesting. Whenever someone comes in, they need something. Then we have to have a handshake deal. Okay, for you to get this, as part of a clause, can you transfer that? Because at the end of the day, no one will be interested so much in our prospects as us as Zimbabweans. When we are saying, okay, we are offering this. Like, for instance, there was a case, unfortunately, my expertise is in economics and finance. It's not in metallurgy or mining. But I came across this information last year in some debates that we were having, a professional debate somewhere, I won't mention though, where I was made aware that in chrome, the chrome that we are exporting, it goes with about 7 other minerals. Forgive me, I don't know the names, but I remember the chromium group, it goes with 7 other, and critical, these minerals are critical minerals that go along with the chrome. So when we are exporting our chrome in a raw form, we're not only exporting chrome, we're exporting, I wish I could go to my laptop and Google, we're exporting 7 other imported minerals. And whoever is buying the chrome, obviously they will say the chrome content in this ore maybe 60%. But then that's 10%, even gold, I think, is part of the group of metals that come combined in that ore. They are not mentioning these other parts that they will also be able to benefit from it. And I recall government freezing export of raw chrome, like that they've done with the lithium right now. And then trying to force, I don't know if force is the proper word, but trying to have investors smelt and process and beneficiate our ore within Zimbabwe. That's a good thrust. But maybe it was done too sudden, too fast. All of a sudden, you don't wake up and decree like it's a law that let there be a smelter in Zimbabwe. And then because a smelter, for instance, will take 2 to 3 years to build. It's a process. It needs investment. So maybe it should have been announced in a manner that there's a deadline, not like it come and you go like what happened with lithium. We wake up in the morning and it's banned you can't mine it, you can't export it, these things, I'm sorry I have to mention this, but these things are an indictment on our government. Sometimes these things take time to plan. So on technology transfer, the long and short of it is we should know we are responsible for our own benefit. No one is going to come up and give us things that we need. We should know when we're structuring those deals, because we're at a vantage point where we've got so much that is needed by so many. Whoever walks in, besides what they're walking in for, we should be getting something in turn. Of course, you say there's a generation that's going to take a while for it to transfer, but we have to start somewhere at the end of the day. We have to start somewhere. If they're building a road, for instance, we say, okay, building a road, can we build it? If we can, we do it on our own with your funds. If we can't, can we have at least a quotient where we're saying 40% of it should be sublet to our local contractors and 60% you can do it. At least that way, our local contractors are also gaining knowledge along with construction of that road. This is just an example and something I think would do us well over a long run, because if it's done and proliferated across all other sectors, be it mining, construction, road, everything else. Like right now, I know for a fact that there is an upgrade of the Wange power station. Who is doing that? It's the Chinese. Who are they doing it with? Are there any local Zimbabwean companies that are attached there? I would not know. But it would be advisable that there should be something that is, by the way, we can't force these things because these are industry secrets. These are intellectual properties. We can't force them to have. That's why there should be some form of an agreement where we're requesting and asking that there should be some kind of transfer. And that's my take on the matter.
Oh, thank you so much, Doctor. You bring so much knowledge. I truly appreciate your contributions. I just wanted to know, because Dr. Admire speaks about the government banning the exportation of raw minerals, or particularly lithium and other minerals. The issue for me is the exemption permits, because Zimbabwe Defense Industries has been given the remit in terms of exporting raw minerals. They have the exemption permits. And I've got a problem with that. So I don't know what your take on it and your reservations. Co-host, as you come in, I also want you to cover the aspect of security, that weapons could be, smuggled in the country, whichever way. But the issue for me was the 100 million we spent on the Defense College, National Defense College. Was this in because this was actually from financial investors from China as well? Are these things necessary? Are we prioritizing the right stuff for the country? I understand the instability in Cabo Delgado, Mozambique. I don't think El Shabaab will outrun Zimbabwe. I don't have a clue they will never do that, and they won't have the capacity. So my issue is on the priorities in terms of spending 100 million on Defense College. Was that necessary? Go ahead. Thanks.
So if you look at it from a global perspective, so set aside the Zimbabwean example, and let's see if there is validity from global examples where the military plays a key and central role in driving the transition and transformation of countries. And yes, that role is very valid. Now, if you look particularly at the US, and being somebody that's more focused on technology, you'll find that the internet, this very backbone of technology that we are using on Twitter to host these spaces, was actually developed by the US military in their researches, and then they spin it off into the private space for the private space to then take advantage of that. So if you look at protocols like our internet protocol IP and your transmission control protocol that runs over IP, all of those things have their genesis in military communications. So it is valid for military to be at the forefront of innovation, because it is that innovation that actually brings about the ability of that nation to defend itself and to also propagate its values across borders. So this is what has driven the fact that when the Americans talk, everybody listens, because they have the technology, they have the power, they have the ability to bring certain things to be or to stop certain things. So
and they've got the big stick too.
Yes. So the technology sitting in the military space as a design principle for nations is valid. The issue is it becomes problematic because Champion mentioned something very pertinent at the end of his landing statement, which is the lack of transparency. And he said transparency with specific reference to the debt and the extent of that debt and how that debt is being repaid. So the problem that we now have, and where perhaps some of the nervousness and inertia is with regards to the permit that the defense forces is now allowed as the singular entity to still export raw lithium, is worrying because there's no transparency around why, to whom, and where those funds are actually going. And that's where our model as Zimbabwe then comes off the rails. We take this good principle approach, and then somehow in our landing of it, we pervert the thing. And then it becomes a hodgepodge and a darkened place where people who are corrupt find the credence to be able to now milk the system. And the long and the short is that it never then works. Years later, we find out that, monies went missing and, so firstly, the military does not have a good track record of transparency. Neither do they have a good track record of accountability. And we all need to look at the command agriculture for us to get that answer. So all we're doing is we're spinning it again through another process with lithium. However, I think we still have an opportunity to even accelerate those guys that have valid mining claims for lithium to strategically partner with private investments or private investors to be able to land the processing. Yes, it does take a number of years, but I think with the acceleration of technology, we could cut that 24 to 36 months to some form of accelerated landing of some type of processing that would then open up the channels. Because to me, if you ask me, it's now a game of who goes past the finish line first. And if anything, if I was sitting on a claim for lithium right now, I would be scouring wherever I could to get funding and financing, because this is a long-term game. This is a serious wealth unlocker, not only for those individuals that have the claims, but for the nation as a whole. So it's a great opportunity. I think for government to allow the defense industries to continue to export with a lack of transparency is a little bit worrying. However, there was something that Champion also mentioned earlier on that, how can we come to the party as Zimbabweans bringing in mining only? Or where's the industrialization? Where's the manufacturing side? I want to bring a slightly different perspective. If we look at the Arabic nations, who simply drill a hole and bring out crude oil and export it in its raw form into tankers, and have used that money to transform desert places. Dubai was a desert, and they've used oil money to be able to do that. There is a valid case for us to be able to look at minerals, even in the raw state, and say, guys, for the next 2 years, next 3 years, 5 years, let's pump this thing out. But as long as we have a structured process and transparency where we bring in those funds, and those funds actually drive the human capacity, they drive the technology development, they drive the industrialization, we can get out of this quagmire. So the truth of the matter is, tinokwanisa kubuda patiri. The issue really is we need to transition away from this short-termistic leadership approach that looks at what I can gain to how can I be of value in terms of building a legacy for the nation. And this must cut across whether you're ZANU-PF, CCC, or any other form. I lend my mic.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for explaining that. I did put you on the spot, but I think you managed to weave yourself through. And thank you so much for your submission.